Hey, welcome back to Soundcheck Tech. In this video, we're talking about lag, and specifically when it comes to your audio interface and listening to yourself as you record. You might notice that there's a slight playback error and that you're unable to hear your voice in real time. Well, today we're going to solve that problem. So, Dad, let's kick it off to you. Why might someone be hearing a lag in their playback, and what is going on behind the scenes there?
It's called latency. That's the terminology we have in the world, the music world. And what causes latency is the computer you're using. And so the problem is when you plug into your computer with an interface of some sort, there's going to be some lag between the way the two talk to each other. The good news is there's an answer to fix it.
Okay, so it sounds like the computer is the main culprit of this problem. Now, my question is, has latency always been an issue for sound engineers?
Well, way back when I started back in the mid-70s, late 70s, early 80s, we had just recorders, analog recorders, and they had multiple heads, recording heads on it that allowed for you to not have latency. So there was no latency. And the second thing that was happening is we were able to hear the actual recording from that head, so that we were listening to the monitoring of the recorder so that we could hear what it sounded like, so that when we played it back, pretty much sounded just like we were listening to it.
Okay, so you're saying ever since we've had computers, latency has been an issue. So how exactly do you solve this problem?
Man, there's some great solutions about dealing with latency today. The first thing is you have to have a really good computer. The computer has to be really fast, and it has to have the right kind of ports. And then there's the audio interfaces. You have to have the audio interfaces that have the right kind of ports that send signals to your computer. If you get the right two components, you're going to get close to zero latency.
Okay, so you said that people absolutely need a really good computer and they need a really good interface. So what are some options for audio interfaces that they can choose from?
After trying about 5 or 6 different ones over the years, I've kind of settled on to a thing called the Apollo. I use the Solo here at home, but we have different versions of them. They're different bells and whistles, of course, and they're more expensive. So I use the Apollo Solo because it has a thing called Thunderbolt 3, which is a fast port that you plug into your, which I use a MacBook, and if you're serious about doing music, you're going to have to get a MacBook. It's just, there's no other comparison to that. So the Apollo Solo has this really fast port that talks to the computer, and there's all kinds of great things built into the Apollo Solo that helps with the latency.
Okay, so the Apollo Solo, because it has the Thunderbolt 3. So what are some other reasons you like the Apollo Solo?
Well, I use Pro Tools, which is an industry standard of recording device for the computer. And the Pro Tools, when they designed their system, they designed it way back in the day, and you had to buy this really high dollar computer, put these PC cards in it, because all the processing for all the Pro Tools was done on the card and not on the computer itself, the card that was you put in the cage. Okay, so now we've got Pro Tools that you can use on a laptop that's less expensive. And what the Apollo, the Universal Audio, is the company that makes it. What they've done is they put the processors, like those processors type things, in the interface itself, and then it communicates with the computer through the Thunderbolt 3. So that processing power really adds a lot of features that doesn't task the processor in the computer. And so what happens is you have less latency.
Okay, so this Apollo Solo has the ability for plugins, and this removes the need for the computer to use the plugins. So would you say that it lightens the load on the computer so that things can move along faster? Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, it's definitely lightening the load, because if you want to add any kind of processing to your signal, you can do it at the interface. You don't have to do it in the computer, because the computer is not going to deal with it when it's recording, because it's already tasking it a lot to record your audio.
Okay, so what part exactly does the computer play in this, besides running Pro Tools, of course?
Yeah, so you basically want to use your computer as a recorder, and that's how we did it the old school. The recorder was just a recorder; it didn't have a bunch of processing stuff in it. And you want to use that as just a recorder, and then the interface allows you to do that. It's got its own built-in mixer, so that you're actually when you're monitoring yourself, you're actually hearing zero latency because you're hearing the mixer built in to the interface. And Pro Tools has a setting in it called low latency. You turn that on, what it does is it mutes the playback from Pro Tools during recording. And then when you hit stop and you just want to hear it back, what it automatically does is it turns that on. So now you hear the Pro Tools playback. So when you're recording, you're hearing your actual performance from the audio interface mixer. And then when you play it back, you're hearing the Pro Tools. Now, in the analog world, the problem was you wanted to hear the recording at the same time so you could monitor the quality of it. But in the digital world, you don't have that problem because digital is A to A. What you give it, it gives you right back exactly the same. And so you don't have that issue. You may get a little clipping going on, so you have to worry about that. And we dealt with that a couple of episodes earlier. So there's that workaround there.
Okay, so do you use the Apollo for all of your plugins, or do you use Pro Tools for some of your plugins still?
I use the computer for plugins, the plugins in the computer when I do mix down, basically. When I'm recording a full session, which is not in this setting here, but if I go into a recording studio, we're going to have outboard gears. Most of it's going to be out of the box that we process the signal that we put before we send it into Pro Tools. But when we do overdubs and mix and that type of thing, it's always going to be in the box in the section of the Pro Tools that you add the inserts, which is the plugins. Now, with the audio interface, you can inject, if you like my particular one, the Apollo Solo has 2 channels. You can put, I think there's a room for 4 plugins on each channel that you can insert 4 different plugins. So if we wanted to put a compressor, an EQ, any something like that, you can insert it on the channel, and then there's a button you can hit. It says record, and it tells it you want to record that to the signal that you're sending to Pro Tools. So that's one of the benefits of having that Apollo Solo is you got those plugins built in, and you can actually apply it to the signal before it goes to Pro Tools.
Okay, so it sounds like these Apollo interfaces are a great option because they have the ability to use plugins. So you said that you had tried out different interfaces before. Why is the Apollo Solo in this Apollo series better than the other options that you tried in the past?
The ones that I bought before, some of them were USB, and you don't ever want to get a USB if you can get a Thunderbolt, because a USB-C, which is the fastest USB now, is half as fast, or the Thunderbolt 3 is twice as fast as a USB-C. So Thunderbolt is the way to go. And there's not a lot of Thunderbolt interfaces out there. There are a few. I've tried some, and they don't have the built-in processors. That's one. That's the wonderful thing about the Universal Audio interfaces, the Apollo series, is because it's got all of these built-in plugins that's in the box itself, and it's not tasking your computer. It's real important to understand how much of a benefit that is, because that helps with being able to do some cool things with your signal before it hits the recorder. We talked earlier in some previous episodes about out of the box. This is kind of like in that mid-level. It's not out of the box, but it's not in the box fully because it's got its own box. But it's still a plug-in, it's still digital, so there's still that element to deal with. But you can do some cool things with that. If you don't have some other gear that are out of the box, you have that possibility.
So this Apollo series just sounds like one of the best options for people when it comes to audio interfaces.
Yeah, it's very cost effective. I mean, to get a full, perfect Pro Tools setup without latency is about $22,000. You can get this Apollo Solo for less than $500 now. And I mean, that's pretty good. For less than $500, you have all this powerful, almost zero latency audio interface that used to, 6, 7, 8 years ago wasn't available. We had to deal with it a hard way. So that's the good news, is that there's a solution to this latency
So yeah, I guess you don't necessarily need to spend $22,000 on a professional Pro Tools rig, but you should spend at least a little bit of money on things like this so that you have some high quality stuff and equipment that can get you some good results.
So yeah, so just a couple of points here to button up what you said with the review. It's very important you get an interface that can be fast. It's got to be fast. So Thunderbolt 3 is the fastest, so you want to have a Thunderbolt 3. And you got to have a computer that can deal with it. And, I've been dealing with computers and audio for quite a while now, and nothing compares to the Mac. The PCs just don't work well with audio like Macs do. They work okay, but MacBooks or a Mac Mini, or if you have a desktop, whatever it is, it's just, in general, the rule that I follow is if it's going to be creative work, I'm using a Mac. If it's going to be business, it's going to be stuff like Excel and those type of things, then you use a PC. And so MacBooks are the way to go. You can buy them inexpensively. I buy used ones now that are pretty good. They've got a couple of places that really guarantee them for 30 days or whatever, and I've not had any problems with mine that I bought. I bought 2 so far that are refurbished. So yeah, just make sure you have a fast computer and a fast interface.
Yeah, that's a great summary. So, okay, let's transition to the tip of the week. So, Dad, what is the tip of the week that you have for us?
Okay, so what we have on the screen right here is the Apollo Solo mixer. And as you can see, with the green level LED meter going up, I've got this thing set. Now, I always put my listening level to zero, right around 0. Up here in this section is real important. We don't want this microphone to go any much further hotter. Now we could bump this line level. I mean, I'm going line level in because I'm using the Audio-Technica through a mic pre through a compressor, and going line level out of the compressor into the first channel of this Apollo Solo, and then we're setting that level with this line level adjustment. And this is this Apollo is set up to go into Pro Tools right now. And so now that I've got a good level in here, and it's not really, hitting the red or anything, so we know we got a good level coming in, it sounds good and everything. So now we jump on over to the Pro Tools screen. All righty. And we do it here. And there's the mix level of Pro Tools. So I'm going to highlight the last channel before I hit my subgroups and my master, the last audio channel. And I'm going to go up here and create a new track. Alrighty, and let me pop that screen up so you can see it there. So it's a one mono audio track set to samples, and it's an audio track. I can change the name here, and I'm going to label that to be BGV1, and I've added it. There it is there. Alrighty, then you have to go up, and so just for grins, I'm going to show you that the hardware that I've set up is this Universal Audio Thunderbolt. So that's what Pro Tools is looking at as an interface. So now I go up to my channel that I created here, and you go up to the input-output section, hit there, and I make sure I chose channel 1. Right now, for some reason, it came on as channel 2 checked, but I'm checking channel 1, so because that's what channel I have the mic plugged in the Solo. Now, the way you can check is you can turn the monitor input-output button on, and now I can see audio coming to Pro Tools. So I know that if I turn the record button on, you can just do that too. Turn the record button on, you can see it, and it's ready to go. Now, I always make sure that I zero this fader, and the way you do that is hit Option. No matter where it is, if you hit Option and you click it, it's going to go to 0, which is Unity in Pro Tools. All right. So we know that audio's going to come into Pro Tools, and it's going to go from the Apollo, and then it's going to leave Pro Tools and go back to the Apollo, because the Apollo is the way to get audio to speakers, headphones, and that type of thing in and out of Pro Tools.
All right, thanks, Dad, for that tip of the week. I think people are really going to be happy with that setup so they can get no latency in their playback. So let's transition to the story of the week. I know you've got something funny for us, so what is the story of the week, Dad?
Yeah, there's always something funny that I can remember. Years ago when I first started going to Nashville, well, I was living in Nashville at the time, actually, and I was in a session where we were doing publishing demos. There was a producer who would get all of these songs from all over the United States. They would send it in to him, and he would charge them $400, $500, $600. I think it was $450 he was charging back in the 80s. And he would just fire up a studio with a bunch of great players, and they would do a bunch of demos all at once, really fast. And to be honest with you, there was some pretty bad stuff. It was pretty bad. And I was working for the publishing company that did that, so I had to be a part of that process. And I'll never forget the first time I heard the term. We were sitting in there. I'm not going to mention any names because I'm sure they don't want that out there. But one of the musicians, who's a dear friend of mine, about a third song, he just says, "Okay, guys, we got to keep it going. We're making chicken salad out of chicken crap today." We thought, whoa, that was pretty funny. So there's that term on Music Row. We're making chicken salad out of chicken crap, but they can do it. I mean, I could show you the before and after. You'd be like, wow, So anyway,
yeah, I guess not everybody is cut out to be a recording artist, but hey, if you got the money and the time to hire the professionals, then do whatever you want to do. So anyways, thanks so much, you guys, for tuning in to this episode of Soundcheck Tech. Don't forget to like and subscribe for weekly episodes, and I will see you next time.